Okay, we're going to take a look at another test and see if we can come up with some strategies now to get correct answers. So we're looking at square root of 48. Now again, if you're not sure how to simplify it, a technique might be this: 48 divided by 2 is 24. Divided by 2 is 12. Divided by 2 is 6. Divided by 2 is 3. So we have 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16 times 3. 16 is the largest perfect square factor. So we take the square root of that and the square root of that, and we get 4, the square root of 3, which is what they wanted for an answer. And let's move it up here after we clear this up. Now, in this next one, we're looking at this, and they want us to solve it and by completing the square. So let's work that out over here. So we said the protocol was to put it in standard form, sort of. Transposing that negative 6 over becomes a positive 6x. Now we want to transpose that 3 that's on this side over to that side where it becomes a negative 3. So we're just switching these two around. Now, completing the square, we're going to go like so. And we want to find our c term. So this is x plus b is 6, so half of b is 3. Now we square 3 to get our c term, which is going to be a 9. But to keep this equation, we have to add 9 to this side as well. We added 9 there, added 9 there. Now we factor this into its binomial square, which is completing the square. And now this equals 6. So we take the square root of this side plus or minus the square root of this side. This becomes x plus 3 plus or minus the square root of 6. We transpose the 3 over, it becomes a negative 3. And there we have our set of answers. Okay, let's pause it and see what's going on. Now, in this next one, as we look at it, they're asking us to put it in standard form. So that'll be 16x squared. Transpose the 8x. On this side, it becomes a negative, and this becomes a positive 1 equals 0. So when we go to solve it, we need to define our a, our b, and our c, which is 16. This part is correct. This is a negative 8 here. That was the part that was incorrect. And this is a positive 1 once you transposed it. So that's what they have down here. Now, once we've identified the a, b, and c, we want to put it in the quadratic formula. So that will be x equals a negative b, which makes it a positive 8 here, plus or minus 8 squared, the square root of 8 squared, which is 64. And then this is a minus 4a, which is 16, minus c, which is a 1. Well, under the radical sign, it becomes 64 minus 64. So your discriminant here is going to end up being a 0. So we have then, as an answer, we're only going to get one real solution because this is 0. And then we didn't do the rest of this. This is going to be 8 over 2a. Well, a was 16, so 2 times 16 is 32. So this simplifies to 1 over 4, which is what they're showing there as well. So again, if I were doing a test and I had an answer wrong, I would write it out in my book so I could have that. But let me just show you something else here that we could use for this. 16x squared minus 8x minus 1 equals 0. Well, this actually factors. This is a perfect square trinomial, so it would be factor into 4x minus 1. So we take the square root of this, plus or minus the square root of 0 is still 0. And we get 4x minus 1. Transpose the 1, divide by 4. It gives us the same answer. So sometimes if things will factor, you can also use the quadratic formula. Well, for this one now, it's in standard form, and our a is negative 4, our b is negative 3, and our c is 3. So they give us the quadratic formula. X equals a negative b. So the opposite of a negative 3 makes this a 3, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 9, minus 4. A is negative 4, and b is a 3. And this is all going to be over a negative, or a 2a, and a is negative 4, so this is negative 8. So let me give you a chance to work this out. I'll work it out, and then we can compare answers. So negative 4 times negative 4 is 16 times 3 is 60, let's see, 48, and 9 gives me a 57, and that's over a negative 8. But we had said we don't like to leave a negative in the denominator. So we multiply everything by, in a sense, a negative 1. And this negative 1 changes this to a positive, and this becomes a negative 3 here. And these are switched around, but it doesn't make any difference there. And then we can just take that away. And there's our answers down here. Again, pause it, check it. So as we look at this one, similar to one we've just done, then you want to identify your A. A equals negative 1. B equals negative 5. And C equals 3. So we put that into the quadratic formula, and they gave it to us, and hopefully you've written this down on your paper. X equals a negative b, so that would make this a positive 5. plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 25, minus 4. A is a -1. C is a 3. And this is all over 2a. So a is -1, so this becomes a -2. So here we go, -4 times -1 is a +4 times 3 is 12. 12 and 25 is the square root of 37. That's plus or minus, and then 5 is there, over -2. But again, they don't want you to leave it as a negative down here. So just make this positive and make that one negative, and that's what they have here. Okay. Teacher makes it look very easy. So in the next one, again, they're asking us to use the quadratic formula. A is equal to 1, B is equal to 4, and C is equal to a -1. So we have x equals a -b, so this is going to be a -4, plus or minus the square root of b squared is 16, minus 4, a is 1, c is a -1, all over 2a, a is 1, so this is a 2. Now, 16 and then -4 times -1 over here makes it a +4. So under our radical sign, we get the square root of 20 minus 4 all over 2. Now, they're asking for our discriminant here. So since it's greater than 0, we're going to get 2 real solutions. And notice that 20 needs to be simplified. The square root of 20, let's do it up over here where we have some room, is the square root of 4 times the square root of 5. Square root of 4 is 2. So this becomes -2. I'm sorry, not 2 yet. Later it will become that. -4 plus or minus 2 the square root of 20. Now I'm going to put this over 2 here and this over 2 there. So you can see I can cancel out this 2, and this is not a 20 anymore. Let me see here. It's better. It was 2 the square root of 5 is what 20 is. 2 over here, let's see. 2 the square root of 5 is what we have there. And now the 2's cancel out, and here a 2 cancels out. So this is -2 plus or minus the square root of 5, which is what they have there. Okay, we're almost finished. Now in number 8, we will give partial credit for this. Let's just do it from scratch, though. So what I can do is take this, and I'll write it a little bigger here so you can see it. 2y squared equals 64. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2, and I get y squared equals 32. Now, I take the square root of this, and then plus or minus the square root of that, and I get y equals plus or minus the square root of 32. But that's not simplified. What's the largest square factor you can take out of there? And the answer is 16. So it's y equals plus or minus 4 the square root of 2. Now this person, when they put their answer, they took out a 4. 4 times 8 got the square root of 4 is 2, but 8 still has a perfect square. So you didn't take out the largest perfect square. So they gave you partial credit, and of course I would too. All right, for this last one, you have to read it carefully. And sometimes a picture is nice. So there's going to be a platform. You're going to shoot an arrow vertically upward from the platform. And you're going to see how long it takes to hit the ground. Okay, so the formula is height, which is the ground, which is going to be 0. So 0 equals negative 16 t squared. Now, the v sub o stands for initial velocity. So we're saying our initial velocity was 218 t. And then from the initial height, that's h sub o, is going to be 40. So we have to put that into our quadratic formula, and it's a is a negative 16, b is a 218, and c is 40. Now this one is just tedious and lots of arithmetic, so we're just going to use the quadratic formula. So we get x equals a negative 218 plus or minus the square root of 218 squared. That's going to take quite a little bit of calculation here. Minus 4a, which is a negative 16, times c, which is a 40. That's a 40 there. Didn't make it too well. All divided by 2a, which is 2 times negative 16, so this will be a negative 32. Now, when I worked this all out, and it took me a while to do it, I get two answers. One was a negative value, so that's not good. And the other, when I rounded it off, remember that this one is negative and that's negative, so it ends up being positive. One of the answers came out 13.8. So again, in looking at this, if you didn't get the 13.8, but I saw that you had substituted correctly, and then may have made an error here, or if you actually got the right answer, you get full credit, but I would give partial credit for this. Okay, well, this will be our little review then. Hopefully it's helpful. I see there's only 10 questions on the test, but some of them are repetitive, and then others are a little challenge, but not too many. Okay, let's wrap it up.